If you're looking for a budget pistol these days, chances are you've come across the Ruger RXM and the PSA Dagger. While these guns have a lot of similarities, they do have their differences, and that's what we're going to be diving into today. If you guys like this video, make sure you like and subscribe. Now let's jump into these two builds. Starting with the slides of these two handguns, one thing you're going to notice with the PSA Dagger here is there is a lot of different options. This slide has the extreme carry cut, and this is one of their other offerings that they have. So if you're looking for a lot more slide options from a factory brand, I think PSA's got the win here. There's a lot of different slide cuts, so you can get a little bit more creative. However, I will say that I really enjoy the simplicity of the Ruger RXM slide. I'm not a huge fan of this angular cut here. It really doesn't do a lot, but the gun just looks like a standard Glock. It's rather simple. It has front and back slide serrations, which until recently Glock did not have these. Gen 5, they finally released front slide serrations, so the Ruger RXM already comes with it, and it kind of looks like a run-of-the-mill Glock Clone slide. So there's not a lot of frills on the RXM, but it works. It's really simple. I like the slide serrations. They're very similar to the Dagger OEM ECC cut slide. And one thing to keep in mind with both of these guns is that these are both Gen 3 Glock clones. So you can put the Dagger slide on the Ruger RXM and vice versa, which just means that if you buy an RXM, because of all the pros that we're gonna talk about in this video, you can change the slide out rather easily. With both of these options, they are a Glock 19 length, so that's going to open up a lot of doors for aftermarket support. And for the aftermarket support of these two builds, you can pretty much do anything. Gen 3 Glock 19 accessories are everywhere. Everybody has them. So you can do a lot of customization with these builds, which is great for newer shooters because you can add on accessories as you grow as a shooter. While we're on the topic of the slide, you will see both of these have compensators on here. It is a Gen 3 Glock, so you're going to be able to use any Gen 3 Glock compensator. Here we have the Herrington Arms Dagger No Fin and the Herrington Arms HC9C. Both are great compensators. You can really put anything on here that you want. That is one nice thing about these Glock clones is they are Gen 3, so the aftermarket support has been around forever, and there's a lot of options. If you are looking at one of the Herrington Arms comps, one thing to keep in mind, you cannot throw the HCDG on the Ruger RXM or really any of the Glock clones on the market. It is strictly for the Dagger. And there are a couple other options like the HC95, the 9XL, the 92P. Those are all Gen 4 and 5 comps. So keep in mind you are going to be limited to the HC9C, the Dagger No Fin that you can see here, or the Herrington Arms Universal compensators. There's a round and a square. Both of these guns are gonna come with an optics cut. Typically, you're gonna see an RMR cut, which is common across pretty much all of the Glock clones. Both are gonna come with really nice backup iron sights. The sights that typically come on the Dagger are usually suppressor height sights. They're blacked out, they have the serrations, whereas the RXM actually comes with a tritium vial in the front. One thing I found with shooting with this gun quite a bit is that this does get fogged up rather easy. So if you are going to rely on iron sights for this build, make sure you clean this off. If you're using this for night sights, you're gonna wanna make sure this is clean and visible. I always recommend throwing on a red dot. I think it's going to increase your speed and accuracy, which is incredibly important for pistol shooting. Looking at the profile of the Dagger, I think I like the cuts a little bit more. It kind of has that 320 vibe with the chamfer on top. It has a little bit more of a decorative cut on the side as well. Kind of matches the overall aesthetic that we go for at Herrington Arms, so it matches this compensator really nicely. I think it just looks a little bit sharper than the RXM, even though I kind of like the RXM over a lot of the other PSA options. Obviously, this is my opinion. It's gonna be different for everybody. And pretty much either option is going to fit Glock 19 holsters, which is really nice about the Dagger and the RXM. Which is a really nice feature of getting a Glock clone, is that all of these kind of fit Glock 19 holsters if you are running a weapon light. Can't be said for all holsters, it can't be said if you're not running a weapon light, but if you do run a weapon light, you can see in this video we are running a T-Rex holster. So keep that in mind. If you do go with a Glock clone, you usually can get away with running the same holster as a standard Glock 19. So moving our way down into the frame, this isn't really a fair comparison. The RXM has an FCI system, which allows you to pull the entire guts of this frame out and put it in a different frame. So if you wanted to upgrade this to an aluminum frame, there are a lot of aftermarket options coming online that you'll be able to do this with. There's also going to be other polymer options from Magwell and Ruger. So the scalability of the RXM is a lot higher than you can get with the standard Dagger. However, PSA is making these frames incredibly cheap. You can buy an entire complete frame for like $50. So while this isn't scalable in its initial configuration, you can get new frames rather cheap, which if you've ever looked at the price of an aluminum frame, they're not $50. So keep in mind this is going to be more scalable in the future. You might be able to do some cool integration that you're not gonna be able to do with the PSA Dagger. So now let's talk about the frames we do have. Kind of going into some of my thoughts about this Ruger RXM. You'll notice with the RXM, it does have no palm swell. It is kind of straight, almost like a 1911. Obviously a little bit different of a grip angle here, but even the stock Glock 19 has a bit of a palm swell. Not nearly as aggressive as the PSA Dagger, and I can definitely appreciate that. The ergonomics feel really good on this gun. It feels very natural for the point of aim, and I think it just kind of comes down to preference. For me, palm swells can feel more comfortable, and they can also pull away from the overall shooting experience. So I think Ruger did a nice job with the way they designed this. It's a little bit more on the mild side, but it's very comfortable when shooting. For concealed carry, it's not gonna be an issue rubbing up against your skin. And it's aggressive enough that it does bite in your hand when you're firing this gun. Another thing I noticed about this frame is it does feel a little bit thinner than the PSA Dagger and a Glock. I've said this in previous videos, I prefer a thinner feeling frame or a small size frame. To me, it just feels like it fits my hand a little bit better. So keep that in mind when you buy this. There's no way to mount back straps. So if you prefer a large feeling handgun, the stock RXM is probably not gonna be a great option for you. I think Ruger is or soon will be making different size frames for this. If you can, go to a local gun shop and feel this gun, because it is gonna feel a little bit different than a lot of the other guns on the market. Moving our way up on the frame here, the beaver tail is nice and high. I really like that they did cut this out, but what that is causing is a little bit of pressure on my trigger finger. It is riding at the very top of this trigger guard, making my finger have a little bit of downward pressure to find the proper placement on the trigger. It's not a big thing, but it is a little bit uncomfortable when shooting this handgun. I find that my entire hand has to shift down a little bit, and there becomes a little bit of a gap between the beaver tail and my hand. This isn't really an issue with the PSA Dagger or a stock Glock, so it does create a little bit of room there to amplify some recoil, making that space known between your hand and the beaver tail so that you can get proper trigger placement with your finger. One thing I have noticed is they did put a nice undercut in here, which makes it really comfortable to hold this gun. It is not going to be as large as the PSA Dagger. The PSA Dagger has a larger undercut, but it is definitely deeper than a stock Glock. One thing I like to see from a lot of companies is going to be this little ledge with grip texture for your support thumb. This forms a great indexing spot for my support thumb to create consistency. It can be kind of uncomfortable to learn how to grip a gun properly, so having these little spots where you can index your thumb and get used to your draw and get more consistent, I think it's really important. Also gives you a little place to fight some of that recoil if you're somebody who likes to shoot with your thumbs on the gun. If you shoot with your thumbs off the gun, obviously not gonna make a difference, but I do really like that they added that. So now taking a look at the Dagger, I did already tell you guys I do like this undercut quite a bit more. It is a lot deeper, causing my hand to feel really natural and comfortable on this gun. My trigger finger's not getting pushed down. The beaver tail is not nearly as deep, but it feels very comfortable. The palm swell is definitely an acquired taste. It feels really natural just holding the gun, but as soon as I kind of present, I can feel it digging into my hand, which in theory might help you fight some recoil, and that could be why they put it on there. They also have a finger groove on here, which is not for everybody. Glock opted to remove the finger grooves on Gen 5, so that's something to keep in mind if you're not a fan of that and you prefer no finger grooves. You could probably get rid of this and sand it down. It's just not gonna look as good. The RXM might be a little bit better of a choice. For me, with how deep this undercut is, it actually feels really nice. I don't notice it too much. My hands, I would say, are on the medium side. They're not very large, so this fits me pretty nice, but they're also not too small. If my hands were too small, I could see how this would be an issue. Your ring finger might get too close to this and hurt, so I can see why it wouldn't be for everybody. For me, it's not been too big of an issue. My biggest complaint with this frame is that the grip texture is virtually obsolete. After shooting this gun for a couple hundred rounds, all this pretty much goes away. It really doesn't feel like grip texture. So I'm not a huge fan of that. I understand why it would be really nice for concealed carry, because you're not gonna have anything rubbing up against your skin. I just wish they would have went with something a little more aggressive on the PSA Dagger. Moving our way to the bottom of the frame here, we're going to have the Magwell portion. You can see that PSA really did not do a lot with this. There's a little bit of an angle on the back and a large chamfer on the front, but virtually nothing on the sides. So not a great Magwell from the start. You can see it also has these big cuts in here to allow you to strip a stuck magazine. Again, not great because it's just gonna be another place you can get caught up when performing a reload. However, it does have the ability to add an aftermarket Magwell. You can see here we have the Herrington Arms Dagger Magwell. It's going to obviously tremendously help reloads. It's gonna give you a nice funnel that is going to clean up the entire bottom of this gun into one uniform surface, making reloads a lot easier. With the RXM, they tried to do an integrated Magwell and not offer any support at all here. With us being an aftermarket company, we like to see companies offer the ability to add a Magwell. Ruger and Magpul did not do this at all. It is virtually impossible to add an aftermarket Magwell to this, which is kind of frustrating because the built-in one, while it's definitely better than the PSA Dagger, it's still not great. One of the things I don't like is going to be this big cut in the back. I understand it's gonna give you a great place to strip a stuck magazine, but you can see the meat of my hand folds right into that hole, making it kind of a hot spot when shooting. I wish they would have just flared this out a little bit further down and maybe done what Glock did and give you a little bit of a hole. But this is one of the things I like that they did. They did fill these with these lines. I think you could have did a happy middle ground here and kept this flat all the way to the back so that you could get a full nice grip on the gun. You can see how much of my hand hangs past the bottom of it, making it a little bit uncomfortable. This obviously is not a built-in competition magwell. It's definitely one of the better stock magwells I've seen come from a gun. I just wish they would have brought this down a little bit and given companies the opportunity to add a magwell for aftermarket support. I gotta say, it's kind of strange that Ruger and Magpul would create a gun based around modularity, having this FCI modular system, and then completely blank on offering the ability to attach a magwell. It's just kind of surprising to me. Maybe their plan is to come out with different frames in the future that have a built-in magwell, or Magpul's already working on an attachment system. I'm not sure, but if they really wanted aftermarket support to jump on this, which they built the system to do so, I just figured it would have been a built-in feature. So now let's jump into the actual trigger of these two handguns. What we're gonna do is we're gonna show you guys the RXM, and then we're gonna compare it to a stock PSA Dagger. Up first, the RXM here. I like this trigger shoe quite a bit. The take-up is not bad at all. It's actually pretty decent for a Gen 3 trigger. Then we get to the wall, which is pretty nice as well, but the rolling break is kind of the problem of this trigger. It has a very long, squishy rolling break. You see how long that is. Very tactile when it breaks though, and then the reset is nice. It pushes your finger forward, it's very tactile. Shooting this gun, I can actually shoot it pretty quick, so I enjoy the trigger when shooting. The problem is that it is a Gen 3 trigger. I think Ruger did everything they could to make this trigger good, and it's definitely not bad. It is a whole lot better than the PSA Dagger. The problem with the PSA Dagger is it's bad on the bottom half and the top half. You can throw this RXM slide and put it on a Dagger frame, and it is gonna make that trigger feel a little bit better, just because of the internals of the RXM are a little bit better, a little more premium. Looking at the Dagger here, this is a split shoe design, so the safety is built into the bottom portion of the trigger. You see if I pull on the top, trigger won't go off. If I pull on the bottom, it activates the whole trigger. This is a terrible design because what's gonna happen is when you go to pull this trigger, you have two things moving. The whole entire trigger shoe is coming back, and the actual safety is depressing, which gives you movement and flex. Never been a fan of this. The Smith & Wesson 1.0's also had this design. They got rid of it, thankfully, in the 2.0, making it a lot better. The PSA Dagger here, this trigger has a very long take up, and you can see I actually caught the safety there. So you can actually kind of feel it. It's not great. And then when you get to the wall, it has a really nice solid wall. It's really far back though, compared to the RXM or a standard Gen 3 Glock trigger. When you get to the wall itself and you go to break the trigger, it is kind of a longer trigger pull. It's very heavy compared to the RXM, but it is tactile, very far back on the break. Once it breaks, the reset is going to be clunky. You can feel it kind of fighting its way forward, not a very positive spring, but it is tactile. I have a very hard time shooting this stock trigger quickly, and then when you try to fix it and you throw in an aftermarket trigger, this is a factor trigger. I like this trigger quite a lot in my Gen 4 Glock that is stock, but throwing it on this PSA Dagger, it really doesn't fix anything. The issue kind of lies in the top half of the slide as well. You can see it still has a lot of take up. The wall is pronounced. Break is still too far back. It's a little more solid, probably a lighter trigger pull as well. And the reset is a little bit better, a little bit smoother, but it's still not a great setup. So even putting in an aftermarket trigger with the PSA Dagger really doesn't fix the problem. I think the RXM clearly wins here when you compare the two. And if you were to throw in an aftermarket trigger in the RXM, it probably would get even better. Another big difference between the PSA Dagger and the RXM is going to be the mag release. And while that sounds silly, I think it's very profound. Once you start shooting this gun, you're definitely gonna know what I'm talking about. With the RXM mag release, the spring is really soft. You don't have to bottom it out when you press the mag release itself. The geometry of the mag release is a whole lot better than the standard PSA Dagger. You can see here, this is just a injection molded piece of plastic, and the spring is very stiff. You have to bottom out the mag release pretty much all the way to get the mag to fall free. Kind of hurts your thumb if you do a lot of reloads, which was not an issue with the Ruger RXM. So I think the Ruger kind of wins in this category too. If you're looking at controls, the slide lock slide release is also better on the RXM. You can see it's bubbled out. It's a nice shelf, so when you perform a reload, you can actually hit it. Whereas the PSA Dagger, it is just stamped metal. It does protrude off the frame a little bit, but it is sharp. It's just not good. It's pretty cheap feeling. I think the RXM one is a little more premium, kind of what you expect from an OEM company. Overall, comparing these two frames, I think the RXM just wins in most of the categories. Feels more premium, more features, feels a little bit more comfortable for me. So it's got better ergonomics, just all around kind of better. I think when you deep dive into the comparison of these two guns, that's kind of the consensus in general. PSA's got more options, things are cheap and easy to find, but with Ruger, it feels like a Ruger handgun, maybe a little bit more polished, spent a little bit more time on design, and the gun has more legs to grow. It has room for innovation with this FCI system. So now for everybody's biggest question when you're looking at these two handguns. So imagine these two guns are stock. You are going to pay $350 for the PSA Dagger and $375 for the Ruger RXM. I don't know about you guys, but if you remember a couple years ago, $350 really did not get you a good gun. And fast forward to 2025, these guns are pretty good. You're essentially getting a Glock with some minor differences for $350, which is half off. One thing to keep in mind with the price, yes, the PSA Dagger is a little bit cheaper. You also get a threaded barrel with that cost. You know, with the Dagger, everything is just cheaper. Cheaper is going to feel cheaper. And I think that's kind of common sense, but it had to be said. You do get a lot of bang for buck out of your PSA. I think this is a great starter gun. But for those that want to kind of take it up a notch, I think the RXM is kind of where it's at, especially if you want to get into different frames in the future. So now that you guys know my thoughts on this, I would love to know your thoughts. Drop a comment down below. Are you gonna go RXM or PSA Dagger? If you guys like this video, we'd appreciate a like, subscribe. We'll see you next time.